Here we got Peter. What about, I don't see ICE. Katie and Hannah. Already, have you heard from either Katie or Hannah from ICE?
Yeah.
I think there was a little bit of a trouble here. The building was on lockdown because of a climate strike, and I think they had problems getting in. But that was a while ago. I just want to know if we've heard from them. Should we wait a little bit or not? Richard, welcome.
Hello.
Good. We got your audio. Perfect. We're just waiting for one or two more people, Richard, and then we'll get going in a little bit.
Super, thanks, Seth. I've realised today I need two button holes, one for the poppy and a separate one for the SDG pin.
You're gonna have to add a third one when we make an Ixi button.
When you have one cast for me, I shall wear it with pride.
That's it. I was going to say, I can whittle one. We'll have them 3D printed. That's what we'll do. Ah, there's Lori.
Hello.
Hello. Retzi, did you happen to hear from either Hannah or Katie?
Yes, they should be there as observers.
Great. Well, great. Well, I'm gonna wait for about one more minute, and then we're gonna get going. Great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. So first of all, welcome. Thank you very much for participating, taking time out of a busy schedule at COP to join us. And a big thank you to Wood for hosting us in the Wood House and giving us an opportunity to talk. This is going to be recorded. I don't know if it's being live streamed, but I think it will be recorded and we can use it for other purposes afterwards. The format of today's discussion is roundtable. There are no presentations. We wanted to take advantage of being in person, which we haven't gotten to do in quite a while, and to have a discussion really at the heart of what is happening at the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, and in particular, chairing a conversation around what is the engineering community's role in bridging the gap on climate sustainability and resilience for infrastructure. I'll be today's moderator. I'm hoping to have a pretty free-flowing conversation and discussion. People who are dialing in, I got you right in front of me, so raise a hand, jump in, and I'll call on you as we kind of move the discussion around. I've got some themes that I want us to touch on, but I'm happy for the conversation to flow in any direction that we think it's necessary. I wanted to start just by mentioning that, one of the core premises for the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure getting put together was fundamentally about collaboration in inspiring greater action and visibility from the engineering community. And I don't know if you guys saw David Attenborough's very rousing speech in front of the UN Assembly, but there's a fabulous quote here that Sabina was good enough to provide, and I think it sums it up well. Let me read what he said. I think it was yesterday or the day before. I can't do the voice as well as he can, so forgive.
Richard.
Yeah. We are, as he said, we are, after all, the greatest problem solvers to have ever existed on Earth. If working apart, we are a force powerful enough to destabilize our planet, surely working together, we are powerful enough to save it. I mean, couldn't have captured it any better. But we also know it's not easy, right? We talk about collaboration all the time. I refer to that as little c collaboration that we all say that we do, but I don't know if we all practice regularly big C collaboration. And I think the challenges that are being thrust upon us, the uncertainty with regards to climate change, urbanization, the fourth industrial revolution, this is putting a level of pressure and uncertainty on the engineering community like we've never seen before. So I think what we're looking at today is to try to air out and discuss some of the key barriers towards the big C collaboration amongst the engineering community broadly, and how we can actually do what we can do to bridge that gap on implementation. So I don't know, I think everybody here is pretty familiar with Ixi, but I thought maybe I could turn to you, Tom, and just maybe provide a little bit of a quick recap on the genesis of Ixi and where we're at today.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. And it was almost exactly 2 years ago, in 2019, that Ixi really became a reality. There was an international conference on sustainable infrastructure hosted by ASE in Los Angeles. And as part of that, we held a leadership summit preceding the main conference. And it was an invite-only leadership conference that really drew in both public sector and private sector representatives at a high C-suite type level to talk about what are the biggest gaps and barriers to sustainable and resilient infrastructure. And we actually surveyed the participants and came up with a ranking and identified and prioritized what those gaps and barriers were. And then we talked about, well, what will it take to address these? And as part of that kind of roll up your sleeves working session back in late 2019, we came out with a pledge, which then became the Ixi Pledge. And you can go on the Ixi website and see the pledge, and there are 3 bullets with bolded elements that I'll just quickly state rather than saying the whole thing. The first is understand the gaps and the barriers. Second, unlock the full potential of untapped partnerships and funding investments. Third, identify practical plans of action and resources for implementing strategies that influence realistic short-term goals and also have measured long-term effects. So that became the Ixi Pledge, and we actually had people, including myself and several people here, sign it and personally commit. There were pledge cards to it. So that's at the personal level, engineers and non-engineers alike being part of it. And then we also started talking to each of our respective organizations and coming together. And ASCE and the Global Covenant of Mayors on Climate and Energy, which Amanda led at the time, Amanda Eichel, and Gregor now is representing here today, they actually came up with a memorandum of understanding, which was the first organizational level agreement that kind of really set the template and built in the Ixi Pledge. And we've come from there. We've come a long way. And last year, about this time, ICE joined, and Richard is now our board member from ICE, and that really helped us get beyond what was a fairly US-centric start. And between the ASE and the ICE overseas reach, we really have started to make it truly an international coalition. I will say the last thing about Ixi being that it's still global north heavy, and so in this upcoming year, we really are prioritizing connecting with the global south and making us truly an international coalition. And the idea is not to create new things and be yet another organization to compete with all the other organizations. We're set up to be a force multiplier. Take advantage of what others are doing. Bring them in. Be agile. Be collaborative and inclusive. And so that's going to be a big focus of ours in 2022 and beyond as we finish up our first strategic plan that is very close to being ready for board approval. And then as far as the race to resilience goes, Ixi, along with Resilience First, who is here as well, Bina and Mike at the end of the table here, yeah, they are both business partners, Ixi as well as Resilience First, and through the Resilience Shift, we're related. So once again, it's a collaboration. It's not, competition between the two. It's a synergy between the two, and Ixi is a place for those kinds of synergies to occur. And really, Ixi's pledge on the race to resilience is to act as the catalyst for engaging the engineering community on climate action and resilience. And getting more specific, we want to bring in over 1,000 engineers individually to the race. We want to bring in some of the largest engineering firms to the race. We want to influence and or deliver over 3,000 projects across 200 cities globally. And make sure that we're not just focusing in the global north, but also in the global south. So that's the Ixi commitment to the race, and being a business partner, they are a gateway for people to participate in the race to resilience. Likewise, Resilience First, which is business oriented, including engineering firms, so there's that crossover. So I'm from WSP, and we're both, right? We're part of Ixi and we're a member of Resilience First. And that's what's good about both the Race to Resilience and Race to Zero. It's not about, oh, you have to choose and you're only in one of the business partner initiatives. You can be in as many as you want. And so we're proud at WSP to be an important part of both the Ixi Race to Resilience and the Resilience First Race to Resilience efforts. And Mike and Bina may want to add more when they get a chance to speak. And then last thing I would say for WSP specifically, much like Ixi is about bridging the gaps and barriers, we kind of view ourselves as bridging between Ixi and Resilience First, also bridging between the Race to Zero and Race to Resilience. As David Howlett, the high-level climate champion for Race to Resilience, said yesterday in a session right here in the Wood House, if you're building a climate action plane and you're only going to talk about mitigation and greenhouse gas reduction, it's like building a plane with one wing and expecting it to fly. For this climate action plane to fly, the other wing has to be the resilience piece, the climate adaptation piece. And I think that was well said on David's part. And so that's what the Race to Resilience is all about, being a sibling to the Race to Zero. And WSP is very committed to that. We've developed a resilience framework in the US under a federal grant that we've already used with many clients, and we're looking to use Ixi, use Resilience First, and anywhere else, any other platform we can find to export that knowledge, those tools, help develop the other tools that are being worked on by Resilience First. I know is working on tools as well. We're going to be part of that. So that's our commitment, in addition to already being signed up to the Ixi Pledge and everything I said earlier. So thank you, Seth.
Thank you. It's a fantastic kind of roundup of all the work over the last 2 years, and it's exciting to see the momentum. And 2 years in, we've got a number of activities across COP. We've got the Ixi Pledge, which Tom mentioned, the Race to Resilience, which he also talked about. We'll hear about that a little bit more. We've got a large project we've been working on and delivering called Infrastructure Pathways, and a finance white paper and a number of activities, including this one. But just on that, I thought, Guna, if I could turn to you for a minute, I wanted to know if you could share the statement that Ixi has prepared on behalf of in preparation for COP. Could I turn to you, Guna, for a minute to share that? Oh, I think you're on mute, Guna.
Sorry, Seth. Appreciate it. Thank you to you and Tom. Going back a little bit, if you can indulge me. In terms of, the start of Ixi, when ASCE had this agreement with the Global Covenant of Mayors, I still remember the conversations with you and Tom and others, your vision of bringing the groups together and, having not only the engineer at the table, but to have a voice of the engineering community on these issues. And, I just wanted to touch base a little bit, in terms of collaboration that Tom pointed out, it takes collaboration, as the saying goes. If you want to go fast, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, you have to go together. So we need to come together, and ASE has been in collaboration with a number of folks. The initial collaboration was with ICSI, and we also incorporated the concept and the principles of sustainability in our code of ethics even before it was vogue to talk about sustainability and resilience. And policy statements have been developed, but without the support and collaboration and coalition with a lot of partners and friends, it becomes hard. And so both ICE and ASE are members of the WFEO, the World Federation of Engineering Organization. That kind of gives us a little bit broader reach into different regions and corners of the world. And so there's a lot of synergies that comes up with reference to the partnerships and so on. And ASE is proud to be a founding member of Ixi and to be part of this group with a vision that's going to help us to get where we need to go. And ASCE has also developed a communique, which we can share. I will share it with Savina and others that can be posted on the website. It basically talks about ASE is dedicated to protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the public. Critical to this charge, we believe climate change should be addressed through decisions and policies which encourage resilience and sustainability of a nation's infrastructure. ASE is also in the process of developing standards for sustainable and resilient infrastructure, which is going through some public review and comment, and we are in the process of addressing those, and hopefully we will have those standards out to the engineering community in the near future. Because engineering, you need to have the governance, you need to have the guidance and the investments to make these things happen. And as Seth pointed out, we are undertaking some projects and stuff that we're moving forward. So these are all things that we're very proud to be involved with and engaged with Ixi and looking forward to it. So with that, I'm just going to stop there. And Seth, I may have gone off the rails, but that's my style. So is there anything else that you wanted me to cover?
That was great, Guna. Very much appreciated, and also for the role that ASE has played from the very beginning in terms of championing and standing up this effort. Well, now with some background covered, I'd like to turn more into a bit of a discussion. And I thought maybe I could turn to Dame Joe De Silva to kick off a bit of this conversation, because I think it's interesting. What is the role of engineers to play? How to do this? The organization that I represent, the Resilient Ship, was actually co-founded by the Lloyd's Registry Foundation and by AirUp, and actually Joe created the organization initially, and also Joe, you participated, and some of your team did rather, in the initial meeting that we had out in LA. So talking about how we actually move from theory to practice and how we mobilize the engineering community. Maybe I could turn it over to you to kind of see where we're at in this process over the last 5 years, what's on your mind now at COP, and how we actually have to turn this kind of practice and burgeoning collaboration into action. Have you kicked that off a little bit, Joe, from your perspective?
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, firstly, I'd just like to say thank you to ASCE, to WSP, the ICE, for the leadership that you've shown in kind of getting thus far and getting Ixi off the ground. Collaboration is my middle name, and the frustration that people sit in their organizational silos and we don't actually join hands. So I really applaud you for kind of getting it off the ground, and I'm really pleased, and I really hope that other institutions, I think it's the duality of the model, where you've got institutions and individuals and companies, is actually very unique. And if you can create Ixi as a sort of triple-layered model, then I think it could have a lot of legs. I really wanted to just share a story with you as a sort of context for this, because every time Seth talks to me about Ixi, and I had a quick chat with Savina, I'm reminded of 2005. when I was working for the UN. And the big challenge was, I would say competition, but I'd actually go so far as saying conflict between humanitarian agencies in the aftermath of the Indian Ocean tsunami. There was huge amounts of money suddenly available for the biggest disaster the world had ever seen, humanitarian disaster the world had ever seen. And what was happening, and it was very ugly, is that humanitarian agencies were competing with each other, not just for funding, but for beneficiaries, for people that they wanted to help. And, you know, I've been listening to the very significant sums of money that have been put on the table for adaptation and resilience, for decarbonisation of infrastructure. And I keep thinking, oh, yikes, you know, is this where we're going to end up? You know, actually, instead of the, you know, firms that we all represent, the organisations and institutions we represent, actually joining hands and working out how to make sure that this enormous amount of money is spent effectively, are we going to end up in a realm of conflict or even competition? So the model I came up with to help sort of shift the conversation then was the SEAS model. It got known as affectionately, where you have kind of conflict at one end and you have collaboration on the other end. This is where we were, this is where we want to be. But I think it's worth thinking about this where we are at the moment, because you get conflict and then competition, and a step better than that is cooperation. And cooperation is, well, okay, we're in the same industry, we're going to share a little bit, that's okay, you know, but we're not really going to do much more than that. You know, I'll tolerate the fact that you're playing in my space, but, you know, I'm not going to like really invite you in. And then you could go a step further beyond cooperation to coordination. And that's saying, okay, well, we've got something to offer, and you've got something to offer. And if we coordinate with each other, we can probably get there further and faster and go further. But you're still not at collaboration, because collaboration is actually having a shared vision and a shared goal and being willing to roll up your sleeves and, you know, pitch in, you know, and do that. And I actually think since I worked on this in 2005, I've taken it a step further to co-generation. And I think actually maybe Ixi, where you started Ixi, is co-generation, like getting people together and saying, like, what do we want to do? And I think the vision of Ixi is beautifully pragmatic. You know, well, let's just actually understand the problems that we've got to overcome and solve those. It's engineers being engineers. It's engineers doing what we do best. But I think it is kind of important, if we're going to talk about, you know, what are those barriers, to think, you know, how, you know, where are we now, and be honest with ourselves in terms of this space. Are we actually all sitting here politely, but all behind the scenes competing with each other? Have we woken up to the fact that actually this is a game changer, what's going on in terms of the amount of investment in the critical systems that support life that's going to happen over the next decade? And that actually, I mean, I haven't done the maths, but it would be interesting to do the maths, to take all the money that's there for infrastructure and the combined capacity of the engineering community. You know, actually, have we got a shortage of engineers? We certainly do in a lot of the countries where I've worked in the global south, where a huge amount of you know, investment needs to go. And, you know, so there are strategic questions that we could be asking about, you know, how much capacity have we got? And where is that capacity? And how do we collectively work to redistribute that capacity to where it's needed? Because I have no doubt that the governments will eventually come up with 100 billion. But it's nothing compared to the amount of money that will be leveraged through the private sector and private finance. But in all the forums I'm in on this, is to say, well, fine, you've got all the money, but actually I've been working in these geographies for the last 15 years. The challenge is actually spending it. And that's something that the organisations and institutions around this table can help address. It's not something that's going to be addressed by anyone else. I cannot think of any other group of people who are better placed to actually think about how we address that.
I love it, Joe. Now I'm going to have to expand my little C to big C metaphor with many other C's in between. I thought that was really, really well said and articulated. And I want to stay on this. I just happen to have actually personally done some of those calculations as I'm the current 13th Brunel lecturer at ICE, and actually the role Joe had played previous. And in that process, I did crunch some numbers, and if we were to move $6.9 trillion to decarbonize in the next decade, you know, depending on whose numbers you want to look at, and I calculated what the current market share of the largest 500 engineering companies are, it would triple the size of the community's business this decade, triple it. I also happen to look at what the engineering capacity is in the most rapidly urbanizing continent, Africa, and compared that to OECD economies, and based on the number of engineers per infrastructure. And the number that we came up with in Africa is that you will need 40 million new engineers by 2050 in Africa alone to design and build the infrastructure required. Just to put that in perspective, to Joe's point. But playing up on this, you know, how are we doing this and how are we getting around this? Richard, around the collaboration thing. Richard, I wanted to come to you because Joe was talking about companies and how companies are approaching this and the market share and you know, frame it in another way to grow the pie, not fight over the slice. But I think it's also exciting that ICE and ASCE, who are the two largest engineering associations in the world, are also collaborating on this initiative. Could you talk a little bit about what you're seeing? You're on the board of ICE, but why did ICE want to collaborate with Ixi and with ASCE, which might be seen as competitor organizations, and yet collaborate in a very deep way?
So that's a great question, Seth, and thank you for the opportunity. And no, well done to both you and Joe for positioning this in terms of collaboration. You know, we have been refining in the Ixi board over the last 6 months a real clarity around the purpose and how we're going to drive the change that we see the engineering profession so central to in the world. And we've come up with this concept that we want to aspire to be a global high impact coalition. The coalition bit you and Joe and Tom have already spoken to, so that urgency of getting together the different perspectives that can make a difference and having engineers at the heart of that. Global, because this needs to be on a genuinely global footprint, because it goes back to that, you know, often said phrase now that you know, no one is safe until the whole world is safe. So we need to do this on a global collaborative basis. And actually one of the challenges I think for Ixi now is to make this truly global as a movement and high impact. There are dozens of organizations out there, dozens, thousands, producing fantastic thought leadership that none of us actually have enough time to read. We're going to add to some of that great thought leadership, but more importantly, we're actually going to roll our sleeves up and help get into the challenges that the world is facing, that cities are facing, that countries are facing, and help bring engineering solutions to play. And so to take that to the backdrop of your question, Seth, so I've been in the privileged position of being a vice president at the IC for the last few years, and it would have been, I guess, almost exactly a year ago, as Rachel Skinner was coming into her ICE presidency, that I was approached and asked, what do you think about the idea of ICE coming on board with Ixi? And I said, well, this is really simple, because ICE has, right back to its original charter more than 200 years ago, it was not established. The charter that sits behind ICE is not a charter to advance the interest of the engineering profession in the UK and beyond. The charter is about improving society through the way in which engineers and engineering can help drive that improvement in society. And ICE has always had this desire to be able to take the knowledge and the expertise that it has and bring that to bear on a global basis. But to be honest, we've not had the mechanism to do that. And it seemed to me that Ixi was, as Joe's already said, uniquely creating a platform, a mechanism for ICE to actually get real about making this a global collaboration. And the handshake with Guna's colleagues and ICSI is clearly the first critical step in that, that moves this onto a two region association. But we now need to go further. We now need to bring on organisations that represent the global south and organisations that represent the far eastern part of the world as well. And then I think we have something incredibly powerful.
Thank you very much, Richard. And speaking of, collaboration, how we're mobilizing ourselves both within our associations and our companies. The whole point is as we've been talking about with Ixi, is to get down, as you said, Richard, roll up our sleeves. Like, let's do what engineers do best and start solving problems and building things. But maybe we need to think about doing that in a very different way. Gregor, I was hoping to turn over to you. Gregor Robertson was a former mayor of Vancouver. He's a board member of Ixi and a global ambassador for GCOM as one of the founding members. Gregor, maybe I could turn to you to start talking about how we mobilize engineers in cities. What are the capacity problems in cities, and how we act? Where's the proverbial rubber meet the road in this discussion?
Sure. Thanks, Seth, and good to see everybody. Some live and some on screen. We're making progress back to reunification. Well, first of all, GCOM is a global covenant of mayors for climate and energy, which was led by Amanda from its startup until earlier this year. I served as a mayor on the board, along with a team of mayors from around the world, and then was asked to be the global ambassador, represent mayors on behalf of at events like this here at COP26, at UN events, mission, different events that where mayors need a voice. And the whole purpose of GCOM is to have a single voice for the mayors in over 11,000 cities around the world, and really to focus on climate action, supporting the cities, track the emissions in all these cities. So there's an enormous database that's reporting the climate impacts of the cities, but then climate plans that are coordinated with the cities, and ultimately climate action that needs to flow in all of these cities. And engineers are a huge part of that climate action in our cities. As former mayor in Vancouver, obviously city engineers are a huge component of the city's activities day to day. Some is privatized, some are public sector workers. I work in business as well for a company called Ixi Building Solutions. We have a lot of structural engineers involved in that, transforming the built environment, one green building at a time. The engineering community is going to play a pivotal role in this transformation of the built environment as we know it today. And cities need to be integrated into that. So I think there was a lot of logic and great leadership to pull this together. And keeping the connections, or even deepening the connection, I think, coordinating it, collaborating, I think is essential to really accelerate the work that happens and reduce the impacts. There's a combo of these practical solutions that need to be short-term, as quickly as possible, particularly when we're dealing with disasters, climate impacts. We hear about every day now that are ravaging cities and impacting communities. And we need engineering solutions to address them on the spot, right to the very long term. When we talk about going net zero by 2050 around the world, that's going to involve remarkable tool up and an immense amount of infrastructure that transforms. So this collaboration, I think, has enormous potential. It's really about figuring out what do we do now? What are the tangible pieces of this? I know the board has worked at this. We have created these action tracks that have been our vehicles to bring forward action steps. And I think those are our tangible pieces of work to date, along with creating this coalition and strengthening it. But I think the action tracks have developed a number of outcomes and tools. And just to speak to the one that Amanda put a lot of work into, and others around this table, the white paper on finance from our finance track is really coordinated by a team at GCOM, at the Global Covenant, and a number of supporting consultants. The full title is Green Recovery and Finance for Sustainable Infrastructure. And we're hearing a lot here in Glasgow about climate finance. Massive commitment today from Mark Carney and the world's financial institutions, which they say the money is there. They say the trillions are there to do this infrastructure investment. Certainly, there are big promises from the wealthy countries for 100 billion plus to flow basically into the infrastructure of developing countries as urgently as possible. This white paper addresses how private and public stakeholders can support the funding that's necessary, and particularly focus on green recovery right now. We've heard a lot about green recovery as buzzword as we've been through this pandemic. Unfortunately, the green recovery is not so green. We have a study now from the Coalition of Urban Transitions. Only 7% of the funds, the stimulus that is measured in a green stimulus index has gone to communities and cities. 7% to the ground in cities, and only 16% of the stimulus is going to these sectors as green by the definition we stand by. So a fraction of that money is going where it needs to go most, and we have to do something about that collectively. I think the more organized we are as a collaborative, the better chance we have to influence where green recovery funding goes. Tom, as someone who speaks to your nation's lawmakers and internationally on how you target infrastructure funding in the wake of disasters in particular, we have world-class brain power here as part of this coalition that can help shape and target where the investments go and how they hit the ground most effectively. So I think there's no shortage of work to do. Connecting the dots is a lot of it, and starting with the dots that have been connected with this coalition. I'm most intrigued by how do we connect those dots most directly into the cities and the communities and the projects that need to happen, particularly in cities that don't know they can't even afford a pre-feasibility study. They don't have civil engineers to get cracking on projects. So the sooner that we can help at that level and really drive down the influence and lift up cities and the firms and governments that are trying to get infrastructure built, connect the finance that we sure hope is available, we should be able to accelerate dramatically at that point. So this white paper is a toolkit for laying out a lot of the pre-development funding opportunity, which I think will come in really handy in the days to come. We've a lot of work ahead of us, but it's great to see pieces now coming into play that we can apply as the rest of the climate ecosystem for making change on the ground is taking shape. We need to be part of building that and delivering the results.
Thanks, Gregor. And thanks for talking about the white paper, by the way. Really exciting, and another great to see another tangible deliverable coming out of Ixi, and it couldn't be more timely. So thanks for covering that. Guna, I see your hand is up, and I also just wanted to mention that for those other people participating, if you have any questions or want to jump into the conversation, Amanda is keeping a keen eye on that. So please raise your hand, and we'll make sure that we hear from you. Guna, did you want to jump in on any of this?
Yeah, thank you, Seth. I think one of the things that we wanted to mention was the initial partnership with the Global Covenant of Mayors was for a very simple reason. We need the leadership, we need the vision, and we thought that the engineers could offer that opportunity to be able to use that vehicle. It's like the perpetual raindrop, no matter whatever we do, if the raindrop doesn't hit the ground, it doesn't make a difference. So those who can make the difference are the Global Covenant of Mayors. And I know that this is going to be where a lot of those leaders are getting together to talk about what they can do to help facilitate this to happen. I always say that engineers can always design to anything, but we need the leadership, we need the governance, we need the vision to be able to implement these things. And Ixi, as we had always talked about, is going to serve as a platform that brings with those who have, for those who have not, and also to be able to bring the knowledge and the thought leadership, but also to be able to implement these things on the ground quickly with the collaboration of all parties involved. So bringing all the stakeholders together, Ixi will serve as a platform and facilitate and accelerate the implementation of all these principles quickly to affect communities. And there are a couple of things I think we need to, change the vocabulary. When people talk about cities, when you talk about smart cities, I would like to differ it by saying human beings like to live in communities, not necessarily in cities, whether it's urban community, rural community, every community needs to be a smart community. At the same token, when we talk about mobility, it's not just transportation, but it's mobility of goods, services, products, data, water, whatever it may be. So we are here to change the vocabulary. We are here to change the process, and Ixi is going to serve as a platform to facilitate a lot of these things at a global scale and accelerate the implementation, hopefully sooner than later.
Thanks, Guna. Yeah, I love those comments and kind of where you're going with that. And I want to see, Claire, if I can pull you in this conversation. So Claire Bonham-Carter's from AECOM, a longtime colleague and collaborator. But on this point that Guna was raising, the interface of how we start doing this, how engineers can, what they can influence, but who we're listening to, right? So part of, Gregor's comments about engineers helping to shape and construct how that finance is flowing. Guna's point about how we're getting the leadership and the vision from the cities about what they need into the engineering process and how engineers can go upstream in the RFP process. You've been involved in this for a long time, working directly in cities, helping on planning, designing projects. You did a lot of stuff through 100RC. Could you share some thoughts and reflections about what you think has worked, what has not worked, and what you think we should be doing moving forward?
Sure, yes. I mean, actually, an example I can share just from yesterday in terms of influencing RFPs, which I think is absolutely an important thing to do. So King County Metro called me up because they knew we were doing some other work on climate vulnerability down in California and wanted to know what we did, what worked, what we wish we could have done differently, share some thoughts with her. And so that's forming the RFP stage. So helps her make a smart RFP and one that also has the right kind of budget attached to it. And also gave her some thoughts about, she would then take back to the asset management group. She was in the sustainability group, but she was helping write the RFP for the asset managers. She said, oh, yeah, we haven't thought of that. Let's go back and talk to them about it. So I think getting in early at the RFP stage is super. Giving, educating before the people even get to the RFP stage, to help them know that they need to write an RFP to be doing that. Getting into influence design guidelines, design manuals to start changing mega infrastructure projects, refurb projects right at the beginning. And I know Tanya will probably finding the same. A lot of clients are actually who haven't thought about carbon reduction before, haven't thought about climate resilience, now are, because they see the money that could be coming from Biden and they realize they need to be ready for it. So it's very conservative water utilities who you thought would have been in California have not really considered it before, and now the money's talking to them. So I think we really are at a pivotal place, and it can be on us to really go out and share insights about what would work well in these types of projects. But it's not just clients, it's also with our own staff still, to this point about there aren't enough engineers. I think there's going to need to be a lot of training internally. I mean, we have various centers of excellence of high performance building codes, but it's not all our engineers yet. And so we're really talking internally about what kind of training, global training programs we need to roll out very rapidly to help people, to help those engineers do the best work, and also to retain them. Younger engineers. I'm constantly being asked, how can I get more involved in sustainability stuff? They want to do it, and we need to help them do it in order to reach them. What else? I think those are the two things I can share for now.
Thanks, Claire. And on that, I was hoping I could, I think Peter, Peter is still behind me.
Yeah, well, I was going to add what Claire said, all spot on. And so I've been involved in the finance track, but also the construction pathways track. So what Joe, you were mentioning about a shared vision and platform, that has tremendous, I think it's going to have a tremendous value in the market as far as like what is resilient infrastructure, like how we do it. And actually the other piece is, I don't know if they're going to release it here, but this developing and accelerating procurement practices. That's a huge. So we can design the best projects in the world, but if they don't get into procurement, they're going to get built, or they're going to get built in the wrong way. So that pieces like that are hugely important. And then I'm actually seconded into the Race to Resilience. So the business work now, what they've set up for how businesses join the Race to Resilience, in a lot of ways, ICSI's partner. So the members under ICSI have a great opportunity to align sort of what we built to people. And then what I'm finding is that infrastructure pathways, as we get more businesses involved, probably 8 to 10 now, the next COP and hundreds, they're all going to ask, how do I build infrastructure? So that framework could be a really great tool to Race to Resilience. If we bridge out with ICSI, right? This is how you build the tools, and then in a perfect world, how it aligns to finance. Because that's the other piece. That tool, I think, as it gets used, projects will start to generate, well, they'll be built to last, but they'll also drive community benefits. Because it looks at overall value. And then the last piece, Claire mentioned, is training. I mean, I talked to one of our younger engineers who's on today, and engineers want to do this, but there's not enough. Actually, Wood, we're going to set up a standard next year. So things like that, I think a lot of companies need tools so that we train to is like a standard. So there's tons of opportunities.
And if I could, Seth, because we're talking a lot about engineers and how many engineers it needs and training and all that. But yeah, the finance that Peter just mentioned, huge issue. And engineers can't do this alone. It's something we talk about all the time. Yes, Ixi has kind of engineering at the center of its reason for being and bringing the engineers to the table, but we know we can't do it alone. And a great example is when Gregor talks about the finance paper, they brought in Stacy Swan here. She's the CEO and founder of Climate Finance Advisors, and she gave some really great input in the early versions of the paper. So as a non-engineer and as a finance expert, same question that Seth asked Claire, what do you see that we're not doing enough of or not doing right on the finance side?
Yeah, no, this is a fantastic conversation to listen to.
Sorry, just I know we're all here to speak up, so they can.
I'll speak up. So, hi. Nice to meet you all on the phone. This is a fantastic conversation to be a part of because I spend my time with investors, banks, people in the development finance community, and they've made huge commitments this week. And quietly behind the scenes, they're really worried about where the pipelines are. Right? There will be some trading amongst themselves, capital markets, new types of securities, and different things that they'll kind of move money kind of in shells kind of here and there. But they really want the built environment and they really want the pipeline. And one of the things that has been part of the narrative in climate finance for about 15 years, if you're inside a bank, an infrastructure bank or a development bank, is that they'll say the projects that come to us aren't designed the way we want them to be designed. So the engineers need to be part of the conversation, and they need to be part of the conversation at a very early stage. You're absolutely right. The RFPs need to be kind of signaling the direction of travel. Even if they aren't, I think there's a lot of movement among kind of the global community and the financial sector to start asking for those, even if the policymakers in various ways are set behind. I will tell you that we are seeing climate-related financial risks show up in asset ratings of all of the major rating agencies. So any asset that's going to issue a bond or be rated by Moody's, S&P, or Fitch, they'll start to integrate benefits if it's built for resilience. And that is something that those three rating agencies have built in terms of capacity over the last 5 years. And it's showing up in sovereign bond ratings, municipal ratings, and various assets, I believe, because it's not that difficult for them to start looking across different asset classes. So even if you're in a jurisdiction where the policymakers are slow to pull up the right RFP standards or the right PPP standards, the investors are going to start asking for it. They're going to start asking for it because they're doing disclosure and they all now want to do disclosure, but actually they really want a pipeline. And they want that pipeline so they can be able to start counting the money that they pledge. And they're a little worried about where the pipeline is coming from. So I'm very excited about this. I think the engineering community and the finance community need to get kind of closer aligned in terms of those things because the policymakers, we all know, move very slowly. Notwithstanding what happens once a year. It's hard to be involved in
Yes, it
every
is.
part of it.
It is. But I love those points that you just raised. And I see 2 hands up on the screen. Before I'll go to Areti and then Laura, I did just want to bring Amanda into this conversation. Because a lot of what you're talking about is resonating in something that the Global Covenant of Mayors has put forward in terms of an infrastructure gap fund on trying to identify where is the pipeline and how do you work with capacity in cities. Amanda, you want to talk about that at all?
I'd love to, and I saw that we had Andy Deacon, who is now managing director for the Global Covenant. He originally had to drop off, but the City Climate Finance Gas Fund is a project that was envisioned by the Global Covenant of Mayors and ended up being developed in partnership with Germany. In fact, to pull projects out of the climate action plan and get them to the state where they're ready to be part of the program. Unfortunately, right now, there's not enough money in the fund to support all of the projects that we need to be ready. So we have a ready group of cities who want to be the pipeline, who have the ideas, but don't have a project process and ready to go to the financial stage. One thing that would be incredibly powerful is a partnership between cities, engineers, and the finance community to advocate towards national governments and other investors in that type of fund, or to integrate that fully into resilience and recovery packages, so pre-development finance, so it doesn't have to operate as a standalone or something that needs to be funded through grant, but it's actually part of the overall infrastructure.
Thanks, Amanda. Already, I see your hand up. You want to jump in?
Yes, hi. I just want to use a bit of time to flag the Infrastructure Pathways Initiative that is on for Ixi, led by the Resilience Shift in partnership with Arup. So the aim of this initiative is basically 2 things: organize and link any existing information that we have, guidance, tools, and standards for climate resilient infrastructure across the infrastructure lifecycle. And I think it's a very promising and exciting initiative. And what I wanted to mention is that we will be launching the website on the 8th of November in the Marrakesh session as part of the R2R session. So the website will be easy to navigate and you can filter to get guided, targeted guidance like by life cycle phases, by stakeholder, by sector. And we will also be preparing a publication that will come shortly that will comprise individual volumes on each of the life cycle phase and will basically mirror the content of the website. So keep that in mind, it's coming along.
Thank you already. No, I appreciate you highlighting that. It's a very exciting project. I'm thrilled that it's going to be launched, and I think it's going to be a meaningful piece of work to help people, to the comments that were being made, who are now kind of realizing what's coming and getting pushed by the types of money and stimulus that's available, not knowing how. This is an end-to-end document to provide guidance based on existing standards, experience at every single piece of at the value chain here to help people figure out how to do this. So really exciting piece of work yeah, please watch that space. Lori, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's absolutely inspiring to be part of this conversation. So I can't thank you enough. I think my question might have been answered with some of the conversation that just happened there, but I do see a tremendous opportunity with the pipeline of projects, the shortage of engineers and that sort of thing, to have a powerful collaboration that can influence good governance. Some governments like or practice good governance and others don't. And I've had a situation here locally where there has been the abolishment of a lot of independent oversight of business cases and prioritisation of projects. I just think it can be tremendously valuable so that engineers on the ground in their local communities, rather than being powerless, have this collaboration to tap into, to influence, to best ensure that the right projects are being selected to provide that extra level of assurance of sustainability and resilience. Because without that independence and the transparency, it really would be a lost opportunity with the amount of investment in infrastructure that we're seeing around the world at the moment.
Thank you, Laurie. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. We're nearing the end of our time already, but I thought maybe as I see one more question. Who is that? I think, yes. Hi, it's Jashika. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, you've got it right. Hi, my name is Jessica Ramchan. I'm actually an engineer based in Durban, South Africa. I'm connecting through the South African Institution of Civil Engineers. I just have a few questions. So I've just come to learn of the Ixi platform through something that it was Laurie's LinkedIn post that actually drove me here. So it's very interesting just hearing about everything that's been going on, and it's a really exciting space that we're moving into. But there's a lot of conversations around what's happening in the global south, and I was very surprised to hear about some of the 40 million engineers required in Africa alone. But there's two questions that I have coming out of this, and one is, how do countries and engineering communities that are not currently part of this initiative, how do we get on board? And the second part of my question relates to, you know, we keep talking about these targets that we have, and if we look at the race to Agenda 2030, for instance, that deadline is imminent. And when we have that type of pressure, often we just default to just meeting a target. So how do we, if we can't measure something, then we really can't manage it. So if without a collaborative approach to the capacity building that we're talking about, coordinated approach to pre-development funding and pathways to sustainable infrastructure, how do we get everybody talking the same language? And then what will this coordinating effort be? Because I don't know if there's anybody else representing other African organizations here, but it's certainly something that concerns me about the big need that we have, but the lack of a coordinated effort toward achieving all of these things. So that's just my comments and two questions.
Seth, could I just pick up on both of those questions? And they're both fabulous ones, Jessica. First of all, on the first, we're in the process of trying to work out the best way of bringing in representation from other engineering associations around the world. So get in touch with us separately, and let's continue that conversation. And your second question is a critical one, and in fact, it picks up on what Laurie was saying. Some of you may have seen today one of the big announcements in Glasgow was the formal establishment of the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board within the IFRS Foundation. That, to me, is going to be one of the biggest things that's going to drive change through certainly the business and the corporate community over the next 5 or 10 years, because we will get this global framework of standard setting across environmental, social and governance impact. What we then need to do is we need to flip that into the world of projects and the world of engineering. And there's already been a number of initiatives that indeed I and others on this call have been involved in, that's been driven over the last few years by, for example, Guggenheim and the WWF have been looking at the specific standards that we need for the world of projects and engineering. And I just think we need to double down on that, because there will be an expectation that every single intervention, whether it's in an existing asset or a new asset, will have to go through a really, really structured ESG assessment in the future.
Very good.
We cannot hear you.
I think the room in Glasgow has put itself on mute.
It should work now.
Can you hear us now?
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Richard, I was just chuckling because I just was saying thank you for fielding those questions, even though you couldn't hear us, because we're at the end of time. As the chair of the board, I wanted you to kind of wrap things up, which you just did very elegantly. So thank you for everybody who participated online. This is just one of many conversations, and as Richard said, you know, we want to hear from you. So if you have more questions, more engagement, more ideas, let us know. Reach out to any one of us. You can find there's an info link on the website, so you can reach out and get in contact with us in the organization. And many thank you for everybody and all the participants in the room, everything that you're doing to help make this a reality. And again, our many thanks to Wood for hosting us today. So with that, we'll conclude, and thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, good stuff.
Hybrid meetings.
Challenge.
Yeah.
One of those things.
She sat down in my brain. I'm not gonna-